Welcome to Flyover Frequencies, where Midwest skies meet the people who keep aviation moving. From hangars to flight decks, classrooms to control towers, and amateurs to pros, we share stories, experiences, and practical insights from the heart of Midwest aviation.
Welcome back to Flyover Frequencies. In our last couple episodes, you got to know us, Jonathan and myself, as well as Andrew, as pilots, and we've been exploring some of the different roles and careers in aviation. Last time we had a great conversation with Kyle and Katie Schauber, who are pilots, manage an FBO, and run the Knoxville Airport. Here on Flyover Frequencies, we're all about connecting with the people who keep aviation moving and sharing their stories, their insights, and the paths that brought them into aviation. This week, we're excited to welcome to the show Jesse Hipp. Jesse brings a whole other perspective to aviation as a mechanic, both in civilian life and in the military. He's an A&P mechanic with inspection authorization, and Jesse works with us as Chief of Aircraft Maintenance for our corporate flight department. Before that, he worked on the airline side of the industry, and on top of all of that, he serves as a warrant officer in the Army National Guard. Jesse's also a certified aviation manager through the National Business Aviation Association, that's NBAA. And speaking of NBAA, he was recently named one of their top 40 and under 40. But that's just part of his story. Jesse also finds time to give back by donating his skills to a program that provides free car repairs to families in need, removing real-world barriers to transportation and opportunity. Above all, Jesse is a husband and a father. His story, like so many quiet leaders in aviation, might not make the headlines, but it's absolutely making a difference. And that's exactly the kind of story we aim to share here on Flyover Frequency. Andrew's out in the field today, so for this episode, it'll just be myself and Jonathan. Let's get into it. Jesse, welcome to the show, and congrats on the top 40 under 40.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you guys are. I'm glad to be here.
And yeah, welcome back. Jesse was just on the road with us in Seattle. Turns out it's not just pilots who travel with the aircraft.
Oh, it was a great time. Everybody should do it. I'm pretty sure someone's got a picture out there of me accidentally deploying the oxygen masks on that aircraft.
Welcome to the jungle, baby.
Jesse, I just wanted to ask you a question before we get going too deep into this. What's it like to fly in a Black Hawk 50 feet above the desert floor doing 120 knots wearing night vision goggles?
Well, it's a rush, and it makes you a little bit nauseous if you stare at the ground too much. You gotta keep your vision up near the skyline.
I bet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Jesse is a Black Hawk crew chief, or he was a Black Hawk crew chief. He just graduated from Warrant Officer Candidate School. So we'll talk about what life is like as a Army Black Hawk crew chief here in a bit. But also congrats on being nominated and picked as one of NBAA's top 40 under 40.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be chosen from NBAA's top 40 under 40. Lots of applicants. I'm looking forward to going into NBAA's base in October and just meeting the other awardees, and it should be a good time. So thank you to everyone who had anything to do with my nomination and just anything to do with helping me to become the aviation professional that I am.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
And for the listeners, NBAA stands for National Business Aviation Association. They provide a lot of standardized resources for corporate flight departments in the United States, but they're also a lobbying organization that kind of collect all the business aviation voices and present that to our government, lobbying for changes that we need in the national airspace system.
So Jesse, can you tell us a little bit about your inspiration of how you got excited about aviation? How did you get into the field, and tell us a little bit about your journey?
Somewhere around middle school, I don't know if it was from watching movies or reading books or what, I decided I wanted to be a helicopter pilot as a profession, something that my parents weren't particularly thrilled about, to be honest. But I mean, it kind of stuck with me as I grew older. I took a few flight lessons. I have a few hours in an R-22 and some little Schweitzer aircraft that I don't actually know what the model number was. Went down to St. Louis and took my first flight down there and was excited about it. Ended up actually going to pre-engineering school because my parents and others were worried about being a helicopter pilot and the safety aspect of that, or lack thereof.
They blow up in every movie, don't they?
Nobody ever auto-rotates in the movies. So I wanted to do that initially. Ended up going to pre-engineering school at Indian Hills in Ottumwa, and did not like that. So pretty quickly I left school and went to work at a plastic factory. And it didn't take me long to realize I didn't want to do that either. But the itch for aviation just was kind of always there. So I paid for a few private lessons while I was working at the plastic factory, decided that was too expensive. And I've always been, fairly mechanically inclined, growing up on a farm. So I thought, well, I will go to Indian Hills has a airframe and power plant mechanic school. I will go there, and then maybe I can do some flying on the side. But I have not flown since then, at least not in a pilot's capacity. I've been up a few times in small airplanes, but I think maintenance is really where my niche is. I've enjoyed it from the start, and I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing today.
Awesome. So what does your job look like now? I know you have kind of several roles, both in the military and in the civilian life, but tell us a little bit about what. Let's start with civilian. What does being the chief of aircraft maintenance look like for you?
So, as chief aircraft maintenance, I'm in charge of making sure that our aircraft is maintained. And then I also take care of the hangar. We own a hangar, so it keeps me pretty busy with that. A lot of it's just scheduling and just trying to predict what might happen, keeping my ear to the ground as far as anything going on with this particular aircraft, with other owners and operators to see if there's something that we might need to be prepared for. And then just me and one other counterpart here take care of any squawks, write-ups that might keep the aircraft from flying. But there's a lot of computer work, a lot of research, a lot of communication. Communication is probably one of the biggest things that I do in my current role. And then just the hands-on part is a lot of fun too.
So that's where you really start out. That's where every airframe and power plant mechanic start out, is the hands-on portion of the job. And you've been doing this probably 20 years?
Almost 20. It's about 18, I think.
Yeah. So you've worked your way up into a management role. But what does the job actually look like when you're just working with your hands? And how comparable is that to, say, an automotive mechanic or a diesel mechanic?
So I would say one thing is testing to be an aviation mechanic is quite a bit more challenging. You have to pass FAA tests. So you have your written and your oral and practical tests. So you have general that kind of covers, just regulations and general. It's kind of self-explanatory, general things to do with aviation maintenance. And then you have your airframe section is 3 other tests that deal with, landing gear, sheet metal, avionics, really anything that doesn't relate to an engine or power plant. And then your power plant, of course, deals with engines of all shapes and sizes. So anywhere from, rotary engines to piston engines, turbine engines, radial engines. They teach you a little bit about all of them, and then how to do, the basics on everything. As far as being different from diesel mechanic or an automotive mechanic, I mean, the pay is typically better. You don't usually come home covered in grease from head to toe. Now, I will say, when I worked at airlines on gear greasing nights, I got to do that job frequently and came home covered with grease from head to toe. But that was not the everyday normal all the time. And somebody has to do it. Gears got to get greased, and it was, I didn't mind that either. It's just, generally speaking, it's a cleaner job. There's a lot more paperwork involved. Every repair that you make has to be referenced to the maintenance manual, and you have to follow the maintenance manual. You're legally obligated to. Deviating from it can get you in a lot of trouble, especially if something were to go wrong with any repair that you had made. I would say that, generally speaking, when you first get into aviation, if you're in airlines especially, you're most likely going to work night shift to start with, doing maintenance, because obviously they fly during the day. There are day shift jobs there, but a lot of times that's structured around seniority, whereas opposed to automotive or diesel, you typically get to work during the day. Hours, I worked for a regional airline most of my airline experience, so it was very, I don't know, the hours were not super set.
So if you're mechanically inclined and you're looking to work with your hands, do you have to have any special skills or just an interest in aviation to become an airframe and a power plant mechanic?
So I don't think you have to start off with any special skills. Probably just having a head for it is the biggest thing. That if you're not mechanically inclined, as you said, then it's probably not the thing for you. But if you are, if you go to school, they will teach you everything that you need to know as long as you pay attention and study and pass your tests, and you'll learn a lot from experience. You don't come out of school knowing everything that there is to know. There's a ton of differences between aircraft manufacturers, how they write their manuals, how everything works. And it's constantly changing. It's always updating. There's always some new technology. One thing about it that I've always sort of enjoyed is that the technology, even though it is changing, it's often a little bit behind like cutting edge technology. So you kind of have a chance to sort of keep up with it. It's kind of difficult to keep up with technology otherwise, but with airplanes or aircraft maintenance, it has to go through so much testing before it can put on it. The technology can be used in aircraft. So you have a little bit of time to play catch up before it actually hits you as the technician. So I've always enjoyed that, but there's always an opportunity to learn something. And I would say, no, you don't need any special training or any special skills to start with.
So, Jesse, how is your current role different from what it was like when you were at the airlines?
So I think probably, I mean, there's a lot of differences with corporate aviation. I'm responsible for a lot more. I wear a lot more hats. We have a fuel farm, basically an underground tank that we get our own fuel, but it requires maintenance. So you have to be certified to operate the fuel farm and take care of it. So that's one thing. Then there's the hangar itself. I just had an electrician and a air conditioning person here, and we also have internet people that we have to coordinate with, and just pretty much anything. Parking lot repairs. I didn't have to deal with any of that at the airlines. So there's just more hats to wear, but I have more control over the direction of my day. There isn't someone telling me how to do everything. It's just there's a list of things that have to get done, and it's up to us to figure out how to get it done the most efficient way, and so that it doesn't affect our operation. Airline world, it's a lot more. If you're a maintainer, you're going to do maintenance. You're not going to have to plan a whole lot. You start off as a mechanic. It's a great place to start. And you learn the aircraft that you're working on. You might progress up to a lead mechanic after a couple of years. I promoted up to supervisor, and I ran an engine shop at the airline I worked for, and it was kind of similar to what I do here. There was less hats to wear there, probably a lot busier, as we would change up to 50 or 60 engines in a year. Um, Aside from that, I mean that's probably the biggest differences to me is I don't have to deal with as much of the actual aircraft maintenance, and it's a lot more managerial with my role here.
So when you're working for the airlines, it sounds like you're, actually doing the job of a mechanic, replacing components, servicing. But in corporate aviation, sounds like you're also kind of a facility manager as well as an aircraft mechanic, a
Yeah,
supervisor,
yeah.
dealing with budgets. So more all encompassing, but like you said, you have a little bit more freedom over your work schedule and the direction of things. What's it like to be a Black Hawk crew chief? I know you just completed warrant officer candidate school, but prior to becoming a warrant officer, you were a Black Hawk crew chief. What's the training like there?
A crew chief is a flying mechanic, and you sort of fill the role of a flight attendant as well for the military and keeping people safe. So when I started out, I just went to a generic 15 Tango was my MOS. So it's Black Hawk Repair School, and they basically at the school they teach you how to take the whole helicopter apart, at least into major components, put it back together. That's not anything structural; it's just anything that comes off with a bolt, pretty much. You take it apart, put it back together, how to rig the flight controls, and just pretty general stuff. And I worked at that in a support battalion for 2 years before being picked up as a crew chief. The flight companies, which are separate from the maintenance companies, usually kind of get to choose who they want, oftentimes to pick up flight slots. So they picked me to go and fly, and I wanted to fly. I mean, they wouldn't just take you if you didn't want to, but if you wanted to, they would ask. So I got to go do that, and that was probably one of the more fun times in my military career. Get to fly with the aircraft. The whole crew, we do training in what's known as crew coordination. So the whole crew, there's a 4-man crew when everyone is there. And so the crew chiefs that sit in the back behind the pilots will communicate back and forth with the pilots constantly, letting them know what's left or right or at the tail of the aircraft, especially when in close proximity to things. Take care of any passengers that you have on board, just making sure that they're safe, making sure everyone's buckled in, taking care of any cargo, making sure that it's loaded properly and within CG limits. Got to do door gunnery. That was a blast. Just shooting out the, just practice range stuff. And I did deploy one time as a crew chief. That's the only deployment that I've actually done. And it was a different experience. And it was not, that's part of why I'm in the Guard is it's just something different. And I just enjoy it. Enjoy the camaraderie. It's hard to find that anywhere else.
How old were you when you joined the Iowa Army National Guard?
Old. I was 23.
23, old man. Jeez.
I was old in basic training, although there were some that were 40s.
Oh, that's even older. So did you join the Iowa Army Guard with the intention of becoming a helicopter pilot, or did you just want to stay in maintenance?
No. I initially thought that I would possibly get to fly in the Guard when I first joined. And there's a lot of my peers that went on to do that. I don't know, there's a handful of people that were crew chiefs with me that are either currently helicopter pilots or they were, and they've already retired or moved on to other things. So I just kind of lost interest in flying at some point, at least for, a regular profession or a job. I've just decided I'm going to stick with maintenance, and I'm perfectly happy with it. So yeah. I do hopefully want to do some flying in the future, maybe just for the fun of it. I don't know, somewhere along the line, the idea that I wanted to be a professional pilot left. I can't exactly say when that happened, but it was obviously after I got in the Guard.
So as a crew chief, what I was picking up on is you're a combination of mechanic, flight attendant, and door gunner.
I'd say that's fairly accurate. Yes.
What a job. What a job.
Can be very busy.
Where did you go to basic training, and where did you do your follow on? You said MOS training, and for the listeners that don't know, the military uses a lot of acronyms, and I don't even know what MOS stands for, but I know it's military occupational specialty. I do remember what it is, but it's a code for a specific job. So again, where'd you go to basic, and where'd you do your specialty job training at?
Basic training was in Fort Knox, Kentucky. I was actually one of the last classes to go through basic at Fort Knox. They don't do it there anymore. So it was a good time. Lots of hills, lots of yelling, lots of interesting people at basic training. And then went to Fort Eustis, Virginia for my MOS training. And I think it was 15 weeks at the time. I'm not sure if it's the same length of time now or not.
Do you still strap a backpack on and huck it up a hill every once in a while?
Just because of Warrant Officer School. Otherwise, I don't really try to avoid it. It's just not in my list of things that I really want to do.
No nostalgia?
No nostalgia. No, sure don't. In aviation, we try to steer clear of HUA for that matter. But
so what's the situation with the recruitment in the Army or even in the Iowa Army Guard? Do they need mechanics? If somebody's interested in becoming a mechanic, doesn't want to go to college or anything like that, can they join the Army and get training that way?
Yeah. So the Army or Guard, there's several different aviation maintenance military occupational specialties, MOSs. They're specific to engine. There's powertrain. They do sheet metal, avionics, electronics, and then there's some machine and welding opportunities as well. Hydraulics, hydraulics. There's not as much of that as there used to be, but there's still an opportunity for it. I would recommend going to a 15 Tango or uniform school because you learn the whole aircraft. If you want to do aviation maintenance as a profession, it can help you out and get you some experience there that you don't have to pay for. There's also just the opportunity to possibly test and get your license by picking up those hours in the military. So you might be able to turn it into something on the civilian side as well as on the military side, although they don't currently have a path just planned out for military technicians to work toward their airframe and power plant license. So there are jobs where you only do your military job. There's support facilities in the Guard, and then of course the Army has full-time maintenance. So you can make a career of that, but once you get out, a lot of that experience, if you don't test for your AMP, can kind of not transfer super well. I feel like probably sheet metal transfers pretty well because it's more of an art form and more something that requires a lot of experience. You don't have the license, but it still pays really well regardless, I believe, on the sheet metal side. But yeah, there's lots of openings. If anybody wants to join up, you just come talk to me. I will happily bring you onto my team. I'm in charge of the component repair platoon in Boone currently. So if anybody's interested, hit me up.
Well, given that, I guess we'll include your email at the end of the show notes here. So if anyone wants to get in contact with you. So it doesn't sound like there's necessarily a one-to-one parity between military airframe and power plant training and the FAA, but it is possible if you keep track of your hours and your training to go take the equivalent FAA test and then get a civilian job as an aircraft mechanic.
Correct. In the Guard and Army, I think, do a better job of tracking your hours than they used to. But I would say that if you're planning on going that route, make sure that you are keeping track of it yourself in some reliable manner. Make sure that you're in charge of your own career and your own direction.
I take it for granted because I was in the Air National Guard. But for the listeners who don't know, Jesse, what's the difference between active duty, reserves, and Guard?
So the biggest difference between active duty and Guard is obviously you are active. You are typically the first to deploy when there's a conflict. You also practice your job all of the time. You don't have 1 weekend a month to try to learn and maintain your skill set. That's the difficulty about the reserves and the Guard. Really, the biggest difference between the reserves and the Guard is you drill 1 weekend a month, and then you have 2-week annual training, and you are under the control of the state as a Guard member. You are not as a reserve member. So the reserves typically have better funding because they're federally funded, and the Guard only gets part of their funding from the federal government. Part of it comes from the state. There's usually more opportunity to travel with the reserves, but there's probably more stability in the Guard as opposed to reserves.
So active duty, those are our professional soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. And then the reserves are supporting the federal component, the active duty component primarily. And then the Guard has a dual role of, during peacetime, reporting to the governor of that state. But you can also be activated to support the federal mission as well. Did I say that correct? Would you agree with that?
Yep, that sounds right.
Okay, cool.
Hey, so you talked a little bit, Jesse, about you went to college for A&P school, and you mentioned there's a pathway through the military if you track your hours to be able to test when you're completed with your military service, or once you've hit those number of hours for your A&P license. What are some of the other pathways that someone might be able to get into becoming an airframe and power plant mechanic?
So something that's come up that's fairly new is a lot of the MROs. It's a maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility. So there's bigger facilities. Just to throw out some names: Standard Aero, Duncan Aviation, Westar. There's others that a lot of them have started their own schools, and a lot of them will pay you to apprentice while you're going to school. So they have their own testing and their own education, classroom time, and then they will also pay you for the hands-on portion. So a lot of times they'll have you do simple tasks or things you've already been trained on, because if you've already learned it and you've already have some experience with it, then you can apprentice and work under another mechanic, and he will sign off for you. But those MROs will pay you to go to school. A lot of times, from what I've heard, they do like a 2 or 3 year requirement that you work for them after you're done. But in the grand scheme of things, that's really nothing when you're getting paid while you work on getting an A&P certificate that's good for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good deal.
I wish they had it back in the day when I was going to school. I might have gone that route, but
Get on-the-job training, actual training to become an airframe and power plant mechanic, and no debt. That's a pretty good program. And these MRO facilities, they're all over the country, right?
Yeah, a lot of different places. I know. Yeah, I mean, just Google it. You'll find one not probably within 300 miles at least, the furthest from where you live, I would guess.
So is it fair to say, as a non-mechanic, that these MROs are places where corporate operators would take their business jets to have major maintenance done that maybe the home maintenance team doesn't have the tools for or just the manpower for?
I mean, that's exactly what they are, and they handle some, smaller aircraft as well. So even privately owned small aircraft, they'll do maintenance on them. But yeah, mostly they do business aviation, business jets, any major inspection where you have to take a lot of components out and do heavy inspections. They can take, you know, anywhere from 5 weeks to 5 months if things don't go super well. But yeah, they do a lot of that. We don't typically do it in house just because we don't, we only have two mechanics. It would take us forever to try to do something like that. So yes, there's larger um, MROs that will take our aircraft to get any heavy maintenance taken care of.
Just like a pilot is trained to fly aircraft, but there's multiple aircraft and multiple missions you can fly. You can fly business aviation, airlines, military, you can fly parachutists. I mean, you can do fish spotting, aircraft, test pilot.
Hog hunting.
Oh, yeah, backcountry stuff. So in maintenance, it sounds like, you can do military. You can also be involved in education. You can work for a corporate flight department. You can work for one of these major repair and overhaul stations, MRO. And one of the things we haven't talked about that's probably more accessible across the country is just a small airport maintenance shop that you can work on. What kind of aircraft typically go into facilities like that? Like just a
So
small airport FBO maintenance facility.
typically, those would be your personally owned, like Cessnas or Piper aircraft. Anything small, single engine, piston engine that carries, 1 to 6 passengers. A lot of times they will go to the FBOs. Those jobs typically, they're probably more like my job here as far as you have to maintain at least in the management perspective, you have to maintain your facility. They probably have more mechanics, generally speaking, to do the work. So if you want to work there, you can work there as a mechanic and just do mechanic work and not have to deal with all the management. So it'd be similar to airlines in that respect, but you're just dealing with a customer and not a fleet of aircraft. So there's a lot of one-on-one interaction. As you can imagine, individuals are much more particular about the specifics of their personally owned aircraft than an airline is going to be, or even I would say business aviation is. People want you to take really good care of their product. So there's a lot of trust put in you as a maintenance technician when you work at an FBO. And if people don't trust you, they won't come there. So you have to do the job right. You have to do it excellently, and you have to stand behind your work. Sometimes things can probably take a little bit longer when you're doing work that requires that much attention to detail. But I think it's probably very rewarding. I haven't ever done it, but also if you're from a small town, probably your local airport or one that's not too far away from you has an FBO. Again, I say it's pretty rewarding, and you get a lot of face-to-face time, and you get a lot more hands-on in the feel for aviation in general, I think.
Nice. Along that line, Jesse, you have an IA, an inspection authorization. Would you say that somebody maybe working at those local FBOs, would it be more prudent for them to go ahead above their AMP and get an inspection authorization?
Yeah, I think in Part 91 aviation, it's particularly useful to have an IA. You can do annual inspections, which you are not allowed to do without one. You have to have 3 years of experience as a technician before you can even test for your IA. But I mean, that's also a good requirement because you don't want somebody signing off your inspection that just got out of school. They know some of what they're looking at, but they don't have enough experience to know
Yeah.
what might actually be wrong with what they're looking at. A lot of times they need someone to ask. So that IA is someone with more experience that has seen a thing or two, at least 3 years worth of things, so that they'd have more experience. So yes, is the short answer to your question. It is definitely worth having, especially at an FBO.
Nice.
There's been a few times during this podcast where we've said Part 121 and we just said Part 91 now. There's a code of federal regulations out there for nearly everything, and aviation is governed by 14 CFR. And there's parts to this code 91, 121, 135, 141, 142, a bunch of different ones like that. So when we reference these parts, it's the rules or the laws that we are operating the aircraft within. So just wanted to clear that up. Someone's like, what is Part 91? What's Part 121? What are these guys talking about? So Jesse, one of the things we haven't talked about, which I think is a little bit more nuanced and maybe not as prevalent, is you can get started becoming an A&P mechanic early, prior to being 18. You can go to some specialized high schools and become a mechanic, start taking college credit towards getting your A&P. Have you heard of any of these schools?
I know that there are schools in Des Moines and I believe also Council Bluffs. There may be others. I'm sure that there are others. I just don't know where they all are. But yeah, as a high school student, you can track specifically toward aviation maintenance. One thing about an A&P license is you don't have to have a degree. It is helpful. It's helpful to know how to write. It's helpful to know how to communicate, things that you would learn in college or at least be more polished at in college. But yes, you can start in high school. There's nothing keeping you from gaining experience at a very young age. It's the same as, if you went to a regular, college, community college or whatever. You could probably also just apprentice. I'm sure that you could at any FBO if you can find someone that needs just part-time help and want to track things that way. That's another way to do it.
So recently we've been experiencing some changes in the career outlook for pilots. And I know Jonathan's kind of keeping abreast on that. What about for mechanics, Jonathan? Do you have some reports and some facts and figures on what it's looking like for the future job market of A&Ps?
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this before the podcast, and I was looking it up. There's a company, a consulting firm called Oliver Wyman, and they had some projections recently. So there's going to be a 14% supply shortage of A&P mechanics through 2032. So I guess their worst case scenario, there's going to be a 26% shortage of A&Ps. So if you're interested,
We need you.
we need you. If you're interested in becoming a mechanic, like Jesse said earlier, I think the compensation's quite a bit better than an automotive mechanic or a diesel mechanic. And you can work on aircraft, which is cool. But it's always nice to be involved in a career that has a shortage of personnel. I wonder if that's why the MRO facilities have started their apprenticeship training.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it is. It's just so hard to find people to fill the roles. And with their training programs, it's basically an interview with you for the 2 years that you're in school to know like how good you are going to be, and if they want to keep you around. So it's a win-win situation for both the company hiring and training you and for the mechanic because you don't have to pay for the school. So yeah, I believe that's why. And it's also, the quality they can control their own quality of training. There's no shortcuts and they know what they're teaching people and what they're not. So that works again in the MRO's favor. But as the student, you graduate with the A&P. So you can take that anywhere, even if you decide you don't want to stay there forever.
So earlier I was talking about the shortage in aviation mechanics, and I don't think I said it clearly at all. But basically, Oliver Wyman, this consulting firm, is projecting a shortage in A&Ps through 2032.
The next 7 years at least.
At least.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thanks a lot, Jesse. How about any great learning moments or any eye-opening experiences that you've had in aviation?
I think that there's probably a lot of eye-opening experiences. Every once in a while, you'll, be thinking that you're top notch and you can't make any mistakes, and you'll do something like drop oxygen masks, like I did the other day, and that humbles you pretty quickly. So it's good. It's good to make a mistake every once in a while and remind yourself that you're still human. It's an easy job to want to get prideful in and think that you're just really doing a great job. And normally that's the case, but we're all humans and we still make mistakes. I would say every once in a while you'll find somebody's flashlight somewhere in an airplane, and they didn't mean to give you a flashlight, but hey, got a new flashlight out of the deal, and the other person typically is just really hoping that it didn't go somewhere that it wasn't supposed to. Those are things that shouldn't happen, but it just is a reminder that we're humans and we're all trained, over the top on safety, and we still seem to make the same mistake. So that's one thing that's eye-opening. Another thing is just, there's a huge level of responsibility to maintaining aircraft and piloting aircraft, just aviation in general. And people in general trust that we're going to do the right thing and that we're going to take care of them and not do something that's shady or cut any corners so that they and their families can get where they need to go, whether that's airlines or FBOs or MROs or business aviation. That trust is there, and it's just kind of, I think it's an honor to know that people are trusting you. Everybody that I've talked to typically has a very high opinion of technicians, pilots, air traffic control. They're just, generally speaking, well thought of, and it's an honor to be part of a group like that.
Great. Yeah.
So what do we call that when we drop the oxygen masks?
You guys call it a rubber jungle. I just
Rubber
call it
jungle.
a situation normal.
Situation.
Snafu. We won't make this an explicit show.
Aaron was in the aircraft cabin when Jesse accidentally dropped the mask by moving the wrong lever, and he turned around and took a picture of Jesse looking quite disgruntled with all the oxygen masks hanging down from the ceiling, and sent him an amazing GPT that says, "Welcome to the jungle."
Promised
Pretty
I wasn't
nice.
going to share that, and now here we are broadcasting it.
That's all right. It's funny.
Maybe
I
we'll
had,
add that. We'll add that to the show imagery. Welcome to the show. Welcome
What
to the
was
jungle.
funny about it is there was a technician there with me giving me a hand with that job, and we had probably not 5 minutes before that been talking about when I had deployed to Kuwait. The flight over, we stopped in Fort Polk, Louisiana to pick up a few folks, and while we're sitting there, pretty soon here comes somebody from the flight crew. This is 747, so I don't know how many seats. I think it's 247 seats, something like that. Comes in and tells us, yeah, you guys are going to be sitting here for a while, so make yourself comfortable because we just accidentally deployed the oxygen masks. And I was just sitting there thankful to not, they only fly with one technician typically. And there's that one guy was up there trying to repack all 247 of those masks.
That's a lot of rubber hoses to reel back in, isn't it?
It is. Thankfully, on our aircraft, you can take the masks down and repack them on the table, but not the case, pretty sure, at least, with a 747. So that guy had a miserable time, I'm sure. But
it happens.
We had just talked about that 5 minutes before I flipped the switch, and so he laughed. I laughed eventually, but
it happens. That's why there's a well-known statement about it. Welcome to the jungle, the rubber jungle. I also think it's pretty cool that we can laugh about it. We have pretty serious jobs. The public and the people that we fly trust us to do the right thing, maintain the aircraft, but it's important to also have humility.
Very much so.
But he got hurt. And yeah, you talked about the trust and the safety thing, and most of our safety and risk management programs now are built upon honesty and also communication, right? We know that we're not going to eliminate every mistake, but we need to communicate about it and learn from it. And in this case, we can actually laugh about it too. Obviously, we were on the ground and there was no repercussions except for the time it took to reel them back in and maybe a little bit of embarrassment.
People wouldn't be laughing so hard if you did that in the air, I assure you.
No, that would be a little bit more disconcerting for people in the air. Try not to touch that one when we're flying. Well, thanks again a lot, Jesse, for being here with us. We're grateful for everything you do for us, and we're grateful that you took the time to be on the show here with us. We really do want to congratulate you once again on your nomination to NBAA's Top 40 Under 40. Congratulations on that.
Not just the nomination, but the actual selection too.
Yeah,
thank you.
I should clarify. But yeah, once again, thanks for joining us, and thanks to everyone else. We're grateful for your time, for your ears, and your curiosity. This has been Flyover Frequencies, and we'll catch you next time.